The clock on the kitchen wall had stopped at 2:17 a.m., the same minute it had died months ago. Stella left it that way, as if freezing time might keep the noise inside her quiet. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence, and through the window, the faint glow of streetlights painted soft amber lines across the tiles. She sat barefoot, wrapped in one of Tomas's old flannel shirts, too big, too warm, too wrong. The wedding dress hung by the window like a ghost of a decision she wasn't sure she'd made. The night smelled of rain and lilacs. Somewhere beyond the fogged glass, the world kept spinning, but inside that small apartment in Portland, everything felt suspended. She took a slow sip of cold coffee and wondered if doubt always had a taste this bitter. The phone buzzed once, lighting up the counter. A message from Hazel. Just her name was enough to shake something awake inside her chest. Hazel Montgomery, 24, the painter who had once taught Stella how to breathe without speaking. The one she had loved and lost somewhere between courage and fear. Hazel had returned to the city a week ago, after years away at art school on the East Coast. Stella had seen her name in a local gallery's flyer, printed in elegant serif letters. She'd stared at it too long in the grocery line, like a secret she shouldn't read in public. That afternoon, by some cruel or divine coincidence, they met again. It happened in a quiet coffee shop on the corner of Hawthorne Boulevard, where the smell of espresso and rain-soaked wood clung to the air. Hazel was there first, sketchbook open, a half-finished cappuccino cooling beside her hand. Her hair, still that wild shade of chestnut, fell over her eyes as she drew, her fingers stained faintly with graphite. Stella froze when she saw her. She almost turned around, but Hazel looked up, and their eyes met across the room. For a moment, everything inside Stella went weightless. "Stella Davenport," Hazel said, a small smile forming, the same one that used to unravel her. "I wasn't sure it was you." Her voice was the same too, low, steady, threaded with something like music. "Hazel Montgomery. You're back." Stella tried to sound casual, but her words stumbled. "When did that happen?" "A week ago. I'm showing at the Holloway Gallery. You should come." The invitation hung between them like a dare. Stella nodded, even though she knew she wouldn't. Or maybe she would. She never could tell when it came to Hazel. They talked for 10 minutes, about art, Tomas, old friends. The kind of conversation that pretends to be light but trembles underneath. Stella noticed the new tattoo on Hazel's wrist, a thin outline of a moth, wings spread open. It suited her. Hazel had always been drawn to things that sought light, even if it burned. When they stood to leave, their shoulders brushed, and something electric passed through that simple accident. Hazel's eyes caught hers, and for an instant, the years between them vanished. Stella wanted to say something, anything, but the words got lost somewhere near her heartbeat. Now, hours later, the rain began to fall harder outside her window. Stella pressed her forehead against the cool glass, watching droplets race down the pane. The city lights blurred into smears of gold. She could still feel the trace of Hazel's gaze on her skin, the echo of a smile that didn't quite fade. Hazel, meanwhile, sat in her studio across town, barefoot on the paint-stained floor. The room smelled of turpentine and orange peels. On the easel before her, a new canvas waited, blank, daunting, alive. She dipped her brush into a shade of blue so deep it almost swallowed the light. Then, without thinking, she drew the outline of a woman standing by a window, her face turned toward the rain. She leaned back, realizing too late what she was painting. The curve of the neck, the slope of the shoulders, it was Stella. Always Stella. Her phone vibrated. A text from Tomas flashed briefly, a reminder about the wedding rehearsal next weekend. Hazel let out a slow breath. The air around her felt too still, too expectant. She closed her eyes and listened to the soft tap of rain against the skylight. Somewhere out there, Stella was awake too. Hazel could almost feel it. She stood, walked to the window, and opened it wide. The night air rushed in, cold, clean, full of things unsaid. For a fleeting second, she thought she saw Stella's silhouette in the reflection, just behind her, as if memory had taken physical form. Hazel reached out, fingers grazing nothing but air. Yet her heart raced as if someone had almost touched her back. She whispered, barely audible, "I should have stayed." And on the other side of the city, Stella turned from the window at that exact moment, as if hearing something she couldn't explain. The clock on the wall remained still at 2:17, but time, finally, began to move again. The morning after the rain, Portland woke in a haze of soft light and damp air. Stella walked quickly along Hawthorne Boulevard, her boots splashing through shallow puddles, the air smelling faintly of coffee and wet cedar. She'd promised Tomas she'd pick up a few things for the wedding rehearsal dinner that evening: candles, flowers, wine. But her thoughts were elsewhere, trailing behind her like a restless shadow. At the florist's, while choosing a bouquet, she saw a familiar silhouette through the glass: Hazel, laughing with the shop owner, a streak of paint still visible near her temple. She wore an oversized linen shirt and faded jeans rolled at the ankles, and she looked so effortlessly at home in the world that Stella forgot to breathe for a moment. Hazel turned, catching her gaze through the window. That same smile, warm, hesitant, dangerous, curved her lips. "You again," Hazel said when Stella stepped inside. "I'm starting to think the city's conspiring." "Or maybe just small enough," Stella replied, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Hazel handed the florist a few bills, then turned back, holding out a single daisy. "Peace offering. For disappearing." Stella took it, their fingers brushing briefly. The contact was accidental, but the air shifted. Something unspoken threaded between them, not quite forgiveness, not yet. Outside, the clouds had begun to clear. Hazel walked beside her toward the corner cafe, the one with the chipped red door and old jazz records spinning behind the counter. They sat by the window, 2 cups of cappuccino steaming between them. Hazel traced the rim of her cup absent-mindedly. "How are you, really?" Stella hesitated. "Planning a wedding feels like learning to breathe underwater." "Does that mean it's beautiful or suffocating?" "Both," Stella said, with a half-smile. "Depends on the day." Hazel laughed softly, her eyes crinkling in the corners. It was a sound Stella hadn't realized she missed, that warm, low laugh that always made everything feel possible. They talked for hours, about art, about Tomas, about how nothing ever happens the way we imagine it will. Hazel told her about New York, about the loneliness of gallery openings and the way she sometimes painted through the night just to feel less invisible. Stella confessed she'd stopped writing after Hazel left. The afternoon sun slipped through the blinds, striping Hazel's face with light and shadow. When she leaned forward, a lock of hair fell across her cheek. Stella reached out without thinking, her thumb brushing it back. The touch was brief, but the electricity lingered like static in the air. Hazel froze, eyes wide, lips parted as if a word was waiting, but neither spoke. The moment broke when the waiter brought the bill. Hazel's hand trembled slightly as she signed, then offered a smile too practiced to be real. "It's funny, isn't it? How some people never leave, even when they do." Later that week, Hazel texted, "Need help setting up the gallery?" Stella stared at the message for a full minute before replying, "Tell me when." The next day, she found herself in Hazel's studio again, a wide, sunlit loft smelling of paint, coffee, and orange peels. Canvases leaned against every wall, bursts of color and texture layered over years of quiet confession. The windows were open, letting in a breeze that carried the faint scent of rain on pavement. Hazel stood on a ladder, hanging one of her larger pieces, a storm of blues and golds. Stella steadied it from below. "Careful," she said. "If you fall, I'm not catching you." "You always say that," And yet somehow, you always do, Hazel teased, glancing down. Their eyes met for a heartbeat longer than it should have lasted. When the painting was up, Hazel climbed down, landing close enough for Stella to catch the faint scent of paint and vanilla on her skin. The nearness made her pulse stumble. Hazel noticed, her voice softening. You never came to any of my shows before. I wasn't sure I could handle it. Handle the art or handle me? Stella looked away. Maybe both. Hazel's laugh came out fragile. At least you're honest. They spent the afternoon arranging frames, sweeping the floor, stringing up small golden lights along the ceiling. At one point, Hazel handed her a hammer, their hands brushing again. The warmth lingered too long. By sunset, they were sitting on the floor surrounded by half-empty coffee cups and open boxes. The light turned the room to honey. Hazel's arm rested casually against Stella's, and neither of them moved away. You know, Hazel said quietly, Tomas was lucky. You're steady. The kind of person who makes everything seem less terrifying. Stella turned to her. And you're the opposite. You make everything terrifying, but alive. Their laughter faded into silence. Hazel's gaze drifted to Stella's lips for a fraction of a second, then away again. Stella felt the air tighten, the world narrowing to the small space between them. Hazel reached for her mug, and her fingers brushed Stella's wrist, light, unintentional, but enough to make the breath catch in both their throats. Hazel froze, the mug halfway to her lips. Hazel, Stella started, but couldn't finish. Don't, Hazel whispered. Not tonight. They sat in silence, the hum of the city filtering in through the open window, the smell of rain and paint mixing in the air. Hazel looked out, her eyes soft with something like regret. There's an exhibit opening tomorrow, she said finally. Come see it. If you still want to. Stella nodded slowly. Tomorrow, then. Hazel smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Tomorrow. When Stella stepped outside, the cool night air hit her face like a truth she wasn't ready to name. Behind her, through the window, Hazel stood watching, one hand pressed to the glass as if trying to hold her there just a moment longer. The streetlights flickered, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled softly, a promise postponed. The rain had returned by morning, fine and misty, turning Portland's streets into mirrors. The gallery show had been a success, crowds lingering over Hazel's paintings, murmuring words like ethereal and haunting, but what Stella remembered most was the way Hazel's eyes searched for hers across the room every few minutes, as if to confirm she was still there. Now, 2 days later, Hazel's car sat with a flat tire on the side of a quiet residential street. She called Stella out of instinct, before she even thought to call a mechanic. You realize I've never changed a tire in my life, right? Stella said as she stepped out of her car, her hair tucked into a loose braid damp from the drizzle. Hazel laughed, half exasperated, half grateful. Then we'll learn together. The air was cool, carrying the scent of wet asphalt and pine. They crouched beside the car, sleeves rolled up, sharing the same umbrella that kept sliding off to one side. Hazel held the flashlight, its beam catching the fine mist clinging to Stella's eyelashes. You're holding it wrong, Stella murmured, adjusting Hazel's hand, their fingers tangling for a second longer than necessary. Hazel didn't pull away. Neither did Stella. They worked in rhythm, exchanging small jokes to mask their nerves. Hazel's laugh came easy again, that low hum that had once filled entire summers. At one point, when the jack slipped slightly, Stella instinctively grabbed Hazel by the waist to steady her. The contact was brief but grounding. Hazel froze, then turned slowly, her breath warm against Stella's cheek. Thanks, she whispered, voice unsteady. The rain thickened, drumming softly on the car roof. By the time the tire was secure, both were soaked through, their clothes clinging to their skin. Hazel looked at Stella, a drop of water sliding from her jaw to her collarbone. You're freezing, Stella said. You too. There was a pause, one of those long, fragile silences where the world seems to hold its breath. Hazel broke it with a half-smile. There's a diner 2 blocks down. Hot coffee, pancakes, and maybe a dry napkin or 2. Inside the small diner, the air was warm and smelled of butter and old coffee. They sat in a corner booth by the window, steam rising from their cups, the rain streaking silver outside. Hazel rubbed her hands together and blew into them, her skin still cold. Without thinking, Stella reached across the table and covered Hazel's fingers with her own. Hazel looked up sharply, her expression softening when she saw the concern in Stella's eyes. You always do that, she murmured. Do what? Try to fix things that can't be fixed with warmth. Stella smiled faintly. Then maybe I'm stubborn. Their hands remained together longer than they should have. The sound of a song drifted from the jukebox, something old and slow, the kind that fills silence rather than replaces it. Hazel's gaze lingered on Stella's mouth, then lifted quickly, as if caught doing something dangerous. They finished their food in quiet conversation, trading stories that felt half like nostalgia and half like confession. When the rain slowed, Hazel insisted on walking her to the car. Outside, the world glistened. The pavement shone like glass, and the scent of wet earth filled the air. They stopped under a streetlight, the umbrella forgotten, the drops falling steadily around them. Hazel's voice was barely a whisper. It's strange, being near you again feels like remembering something I never forgot. Stella looked up, rain gathering in her lashes. Then don't forget it again. The space between them dissolved. Hazel's hand lifted, hesitating at the edge of Stella's face, fingers trembling. Stella leaned forward just enough for permission to exist. The kiss that followed was soft, just a breath of contact, a question asked in the language of skin. It lingered, then broke, leaving behind the taste of rain and something like wonder. When they parted, neither spoke for a moment. Hazel's eyes glistened, not with tears, but with the dizzy recognition of something both inevitable and forbidden. I shouldn't have, Hazel said at last, though her voice betrayed no regret. I know, Stella whispered. But we did. They stood there, the rain now little more than a mist, the world around them dim and infinite. Stella's heart raced, each beat echoing the impossible mix of guilt and relief. Hazel took a small step back, her expression unreadable. Tomas, she began, but couldn't finish. The name hung between them like a sudden gust of cold air. Stella's chest tightened. I know, she said again, softer this time, as if it could undo what had already happened. Hazel shook her head slightly, as if trying to wake from a dream. I have to go. She turned and started walking, her figure dissolving into the soft blur of rain. Stella stayed under the streetlight, watching until she was gone, until the sound of footsteps faded completely. When she finally returned to her car, she saw the daisy Hazel had given her days earlier still on the dashboard, wilted but somehow beautiful. She picked it up, pressed it gently between her palms, and closed her eyes. Outside, the rain began again, steady and patient, as if the sky itself refused to let go. The morning after the kiss, the sky cleared as if nothing had happened. Portland woke beneath a thin veil of sunlight, the kind that warms without promising anything. But inside Stella, everything was different, fractured, bright, and unbearably quiet. She moved through her apartment as though walking through someone else's life. The wedding dress still hung by the window, but the sight of it now made her stomach twist. She touched the fabric, cold and smooth beneath her fingers, and remembered the way Hazel's lips had felt, tentative, trembling, full of years unsaid. When Tomas called that afternoon, she let the phone ring twice before answering. You disappeared this morning, he said gently. You okay? I just needed air. You've been saying that a lot lately. Stella almost smiled. Tomas always had a way of hearing the things she didn't say. She looked out the window. The city shimmered, freshly washed by rain. "I think I'm just tired," she said. "Maybe we should take a few days off before the wedding. Go somewhere quiet." The thought of being alone with him, of pretending she didn't feel the storm she'd unleashed, made her chest ache. "Maybe," she murmured. That evening, she drove to the river. The Willamette glided dark and slow under the bridge, reflecting streaks of fading light. She parked by the water and watched a cluster of wildflowers bending in the breeze. A few petals broke free, scattering across the surface. She wondered if Hazel was somewhere painting that very scene, translating its silence into color. Hazel, meanwhile, sat in her studio surrounded by unfinished canvases. She had tried to paint since dawn but couldn't focus. Every brushstroke turned into a memory: Stella's face under the streetlight, the sound of rain against her skin. She'd told herself it was a mistake, that it couldn't happen again. But every time she closed her eyes, it did. The knock on the door startled her. Tomas stood there, smiling faintly, holding 2 cups of coffee. "I was nearby," he said. "Thought I'd check on you." Hazel froze for a heartbeat before stepping aside. The air thickened instantly. He looked around the studio, his gaze lingering on the half-finished painting of a woman by a window, Stella's outline unmistakable. "Beautiful," Tomas said quietly. "But she looks familiar." Hazel's throat tightened. "Just someone I used to know." He nodded, his expression unreadable. "You and Stella used to be close." "We all were," she said, forcing a smile. "Back then." Tomas took a slow sip of coffee. "She's been distant lately. I thought maybe she was nervous about the wedding. But now I'm not sure that's it." Hazel swallowed hard. "What do you mean?" "I mean, sometimes the people we love start looking at someone else, and we don't see it until it's too late." For a moment, the world went utterly still. Hazel felt the truth pressing against her ribs, desperate to break free. But she couldn't say it. Not to him. Not like this. Tomas gave her a long, searching look before setting his cup down. "Whatever it is, I just hope she's happy. That's all I've ever wanted for her." When he left, Hazel closed the door and slid down against it, her palms trembling. The truth sat between her and the wood like a living thing. That night, Stella dreamed of rain again, of standing in a field of daisies that turned to ash as she reached for them. She woke before dawn, heart racing, the sound of thunder rolling far away. Her phone buzzed. A message from Hazel: "We need to talk." They met at the same cafe as before, the air thick with the smell of espresso and regret. Hazel sat by the window, a scarf wrapped loosely around her neck. Her eyes looked darker than usual, like storm clouds refusing to break. "You shouldn't have come," Hazel said softly when Stella sat down. "You're the one who texted me." Hazel looked out at the street. "I know. I just didn't know what else to do." Stella waited. The rain began again, fine and relentless, tracing the glass in delicate lines. "I told Tomas you looked different," Hazel said finally. "He didn't ask why, but I think he knows." The words hit Stella like a cold wind. "What did you tell him?" "Nothing. But he's not stupid, Stella." Stella's hands tightened around her cup. "I didn't mean for this to happen." "I know," Hazel whispered. "Neither did I." They sat in silence, the kind that hums with everything left unsaid. Stella studied Hazel's face, the slight tremor in her lip, the way her fingers fidgeted with the scarf. Every instinct told her to reach out, to bridge the space between them. But outside, a car passed through a puddle, splashing the window, and the sound broke the spell. Hazel exhaled. "I think you should go through with it. The wedding. Tomas loves you." "And what about you?" Hazel hesitated. "I'll paint. I'll move on." That's what I'm good at. Is that really what you want? Hazel met her gaze, eyes glistening. No. But it's what's right. The rain slowed to a drizzle. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell chimed. Hazel looked at her reflection in the window, their faces overlapping in the glass. You remember that night by the river, years ago? You said love was the most honest thing we could ever do. I was young, Stella said softly. And brave in ways I'm not anymore. Hazel smiled sadly. Then maybe I'll be brave for both of us. She stood, pulling on her coat. Stella reached out instinctively, fingers grazing Hazel's wrist. The contact stopped her mid-step. Hazel turned, her eyes wet, her breath uneven. Don't, she said gently. If you ask me to stay, I will. And you'll hate me for it. Stella let her hand fall. Hazel leaned down, close enough for her hair to brush Stella's cheek, close enough to smell the faint trace of rain and paint that always followed her. I'll send you something before the wedding, Hazel whispered. A painting. That's how I'll say goodbye. Then she walked out into the rain. Stella sat there long after she was gone, staring at the empty cup in front of her. The daisy Hazel had once given her was still pressed between the pages of her notebook, fragile and colorless now, but intact. She opened it, traced the outline of the petals, and thought of the field from her dream. Her phone lit up with a new message, Hazel's name again. But before she could open it, Stella's thumb hovered, then pressed delete. The screen went dark, her reflection faint against the black glass. Outside, the rain fell harder, and somewhere a door swung in the wind, neither open nor closed. The morning of the wedding began in silence. Outside, the world shimmered with the pale light of early spring, and a thin layer of mist floated over the trees like a veil unsure of its purpose. Stella stood before the same window where weeks earlier she had watched the rain fall, her reflection framed by soft lace curtains. The dress was still there, pressed, perfect, waiting, but something inside her had changed. The woman staring back wasn't the same one who had once measured love by expectation and duty. Her eyes held something quieter now, something unshakably honest. Tomas knocked softly before entering. He was calm, almost too calm, his tie slightly crooked, his expression unreadable. You look beautiful, he said, though his voice carried a weight that neither could ignore. She smiled, small and fleeting, her throat tight with gratitude and guilt. Tomas. He raised a hand, cutting her off gently. You don't have to explain. I've known you my whole life, Stella. I could tell the moment you stopped looking for me. He stepped closer, the scent of cologne and cedar filling the space between them. I think I always knew who you were waiting for. The words landed like a kindness she hadn't dared to imagine. Her eyes filled before she could stop them. You don't deserve this, she whispered. He smiled faintly. Maybe not. But maybe this is what love looks like sometimes, letting go before it breaks both of us. Outside, a car engine hummed in the distance. The sound drew her attention to the road that led to the small chapel. Through the fogged glass, Stella saw the shape of a limousine pulling up, its headlights slicing through the morning mist. Tomas followed her gaze and exhaled. You should go, he said simply. She turned back to him, her heart trembling. How will I ever thank you for this? Just live honestly, he replied, straightening his tie. That'll be enough. When she stepped outside, the air smelled of wet earth and lilies. The church bell began to ring, its echo folding into the hush of the valley. The limousine door opened, and Hazel stepped out, dressed not in white but in soft ivory, her hair loose, her eyes bright and uncertain. A gust of wind caught her veil, carrying it briefly toward Stella before it fell gently at her feet, as if guided by something unseen. Hazel smiled through tears. I didn't know if you'd come. Stella's voice broke when she answered. I almost didn't. They stood facing each other, the world around them fading into stillness. Hazel took a step forward. "I sent you a message," she said softly. "When you didn't answer, I thought maybe that was your answer." "I read it," Stella confessed, "then I deleted it because it scared me." Hazel's eyes glistened. "And now?" Stella took her hand. "Now I'm still scared. But I'm tired of choosing fear." They walked together toward the chapel, Tomas waiting at the entrance, his hands clasped, his expression serene. As they approached, he met Hazel's gaze and gave a nod so full of quiet understanding that Hazel almost faltered. She mouthed a thank you, and he answered with a small smile, the kind that carried years of friendship and the grace of forgiveness. Inside, the chapel was intimate, white candles flickering against stone walls, sunlight filtering through stained glass in shades of gold and blue. The same priest who had been meant to bless Stella and Tomas's vows now stood before them with a knowing calm. "Love," he said, "is never a mistake. It's only the fear of it that keeps us from becoming whole." Hazel trembled when she took Stella's hands. "I've run from this for so long," she whispered. "From you. From myself. But I'm done running." Stella smiled through tears. "Then let's stop together." The ceremony unfolded like a breath held for too long finally released. When the music began, the same song that had played softly at Hazel's gallery, the two women looked at each other as if seeing not the past, but the promise of what could still be saved. The kiss that sealed it was tender, unhurried, more truth than desire, more healing than hunger. Around them, the air seemed to shimmer, the scent of flowers mingled with candle wax, and somewhere outside, the rain began again, light and forgiving. Later, at the small reception Tomas insisted on hosting, laughter filled the courtyard. Hazel moved through the crowd in her ivory dress, the hem brushing the damp grass. Stella watched her from across the garden, her heart steady for the first time in years. When Hazel finally reached her, she carried a single daisy, the same kind she'd once handed over as a peace offering in a florist's shop. "For luck," Hazel said, tucking it gently into Stella's hair. "For courage," Stella replied, covering Hazel's hand with her own. They stood together as the sun broke through the clouds, scattering light across the wet petals at their feet. Everything smelled of rain and renewal. In the distance, Tomas danced clumsily with Hazel's younger sister, his laughter genuine and bright. The sight made Stella's chest ache with something tender and grateful. As evening fell, Hazel led her back to the river, the same spot where Stella had once sat alone, watching the wildflowers bend under the wind. The water caught the sunset in silver streaks, and the world grew soft and gold. Hazel slipped off her shoes and stepped onto the damp bank, her reflection rippling beside Stella's. "Do you ever think we were meant to find each other no matter what?" Hazel asked quietly. Stella watched the current move, smooth and patient. "Maybe not meant," she said, "but brave enough to try again." Hazel smiled, leaning her head against Stella's shoulder. "That's enough for me." The sound of the river wrapped around them like music. The air smelled of lilac again, and Stella remembered the first time she had sat by this same water, clutching doubt like a shield. Now, she felt only peace, the kind that comes after the storm, quiet but certain. The clock at home still read 2:17, frozen in the past. But somewhere deep within her, time had started to move again. Love, she thought, isn't about what lasts forever. It's about the courage to stand in the truth, even when it trembles. And as Hazel's fingers intertwined with hers, the world seemed to exhale at last. If this story touched you, subscribe to Secret Garden Stories, leave your comment, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today.